This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday, June 17th, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and together with my colleagues, we're going over stories happening in and around Central Florida. Joining me on this call, I have education reporter Annie Martin, intern reporter Dana Cassidy, and theater and arts reporter Matt Palm. Thank you guys so much for being here. We got a lot to get into, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Starting off first, yesterday, Governor DeSantis had a press conference in which he said the state would not shut down Florida's economy again or scale back the reopening of businesses despite record numbers of new daily cases of coronavirus cases being reported in the state of Florida. Tuesday's 2,703 reported cases put Florida's total above the 80,000 mark, which was the third time in 4 days that more than 2,000 cases were reported in a single day, and the 13th time in the past 14 days that the state recorded more than 1,000 new cases. I believe we have a clip of the governor talking about this, so let's go ahead and take a look at that right now.
We're not shutting down. We're going to go forward. We're going to continue to protect the most vulnerable. We're going to continue to advise, particularly our elderly population, to maintain social distancing, avoid crowds. The mask, we've basically said from the beginning, if you can't social distance or if you're in a face-to-face, then the masks are recommended. But I see, you don't need to be wearing it if you're going for a jog or you're on the beach. And so some of this stuff can get out of hand. I want to be more reasonable about it. I would definitely encourage people when you're in, whether it's a business situation like in a restaurant, if you're going to a place where you can't social distance, to do it. But in terms of forcing that under penalty of criminal law, we're not going to be doing that. I think it would be applied unevenly, and I just don't think it would end up working. At the end of the day, we should be trusting people to make good decisions. Floridians have shown they can do that thus far, and I think that they'll continue to do it in the future.
All right, we're going to keep moving. But in regards to what the governor was talking about, in his belief that Floridians will continue to social distance and practice good behaviors, Annie, you recently came out with a story taking a look at a spike in cases, or at least a rise in cases, over in the UCF area, specifically in the bar scene. What do we know?
Both the Orange County and Seminole County health departments are saying they're seeing an increase in cases near UCF. And while we don't have a ton of details about where those cases are coming from, the Orange County Health Department did say that they've linked about 30 of them to a single business. We don't know what type of business, but it could be a bar. And as we all know, the bars that were shut down for several months, were allowed to reopen about a week and a half ago. And, college students were eager to go out. And I heard from students who said that they were at a place called the Knights Pub the day the bars were allowed to reopen. And the establishment was people started lining up outside for an hour before they opened, and there was little social distancing inside, and nobody except people that worked at the bar were wearing masks. And one student told me that he went there with 5 friends, and he and 4 of the people in his group all tested positive for coronavirus afterward.
On a state level, we've heard from the governor saying that he's not concerned about this rise in cases. However, you were able to hear from county officials specific to this area. Are they at all alarmed about what's going on over there?
Yeah, they are alarmed. And I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Todd Husty, who's Seminole County's medical director. And he was speaking about infections among people under 30. And what he said was they're definitely a less cautious group. And I know I was when I was that age. And he said, and it's pretty much the loosening of the social distancing, people not wearing facial coverings. And we're all seeing pictures of people in bars where everyone is standing shoulder to shoulder. So yeah, definitely there's some concern among local health officials about this.
So I guess just in regards to those concerns, I mean, how likely is it that we are to see perhaps social distancing orders coming back into play within the county or within Orange or Seminole?
It doesn't sound like that's imminent. However, I think this is an issue that UCF is going to have to deal with as they prepare for classes to resume in August. They've released a plan that shows that they're not going to have in-person classes with more than 100 people, and they're going to make sure people are spaced out so they're not sitting in a desk with somebody right next to them, and people are going to be required to wear face masks when they're indoors. And a lot of double occupancy dorm rooms are going to be converted into single occupancy ones. So definitely the university is taking some steps on campus to encourage social distancing. But I think they've got a real challenge on their hands because most students don't live on campus and they really have little control, what goes on, when students go out or when they leave campus.
There was a point that got brought up in your report that I thought sounded especially challenging, which was trying to articulate the seriousness of social distancing practices to perhaps a population that may have, I believe was stated, a Superman mentality, or the idea that I'm young, therefore I'm invincible. But again, the big idea to take away here is maybe you are, but you also have the ability to spread it to somebody else who might not be. Dana, I want to bring you into the fold on this because you recently came out with a piece addressing this matter, to wear a mask or not, in which you talked to a lot of Central Floridians asking that very question. I'm wondering, what was the overall consensus that you were getting from people? Are people taking it seriously or not?
It really depends on who you ask and where you ask. So some Floridians are thinking, well, I need to wear a mask out in public because if for my own health, if they have immunodeficiency problems or other issues, they really could get very sick and potentially die if they're not wearing a mask out in public. And for other people, they don't really see the mask as necessary. Some say, well, people aren't cleaning their mask properly. They're not wearing it properly. What's the point of wearing it if you're healthy yourself? So it's definitely a toss-up. But it's really interesting to see how people are approaching the topic, how people aren't. And if you go out in public, like let's say Waterford Lakes Shopping Center, and you just walk down the sidewalk, you see different stores with different requirements. And you definitely see a mix of, you could see a group of people all wearing masks, and you can see a group of people not wearing masks. So it's very interesting to see how Central Floridians are approaching this topic as things reopen.
Very much so. And, in your piece, you did point out that in many areas, wearing a mask is not required. It is strongly encouraged. However, you did touch on an area that is an extremely controlled environment, the theme parks. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about wearing a mask in theme parks. Is this required, and how do people feel about it over there?
Sure, absolutely. So in theme parks, masks are required, and they try to enforce social distancing policies, and they'll have little rest areas where you can obviously, if you're drinking some water or something, you can take your mask off and just drink it. But for the most part, you are wearing your mask. I spoke with someone very involved in the theme park area, just very well versed, and he said when he went back, he saw most people abiding by these rules. They seem pretty strict where if you were wearing a mask, they made sure to come up and say, okay, your mask is on properly. If you're not wearing it, maybe they'd say something, maybe they wouldn't. But for the most part, Floridians seem to be abiding by these rules. But for certain things like riding a water ride, I don't believe masks are required for that. So there are some different ways to maybe catch a breath quickly, but definitely in the theme park where it is such a controlled environment, they are making sure that residents and tourists are wearing their masks.
You touched on a really interesting topic about how the whole idea of the masks. It's really a two-part issue. There is the guidelines of wearing a mask, and then there's the mentality that is accompanied with wearing the mask. And specifically, you brought up how social media and public figures have played a role in people's feelings on masks. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, like a lot of topics that people follow and closely in pop culture and in politics, it tends to influence their decision. So, sometimes people have more of a tough guy mentality saying, well, I think we need the economy open. We need to get back to our lives. We need to get back to work. So, maybe at the risk of a few sick people and potentially maybe even some deaths. Unfortunately, with that, that's just the perspective I got from some people. While others are like, no, we really need to keep it safe. We need to make sure, even if our economy isn't doing as great, that we are protecting the lives of Americans. But it's interesting to see how celebrities, politicians, and maybe even political beliefs kind of play a role in it. While it's not a directly bipartisan issue, maybe some certain morals or certain standpoints that you look at life and look at politics can influence the reasoning and ways you wear a mask in public.
Annie, I want to bring you back into this for a moment here. You were talking, of course, to younger people as far as that mask wearing mentality goes. With what Dana was just talking about, is that reflective in what you were seeing as well?
Well, I talked with a mom who's she has two sons who live near UCF, and she was concerned that her son's friends and other people that they're hanging out with are not wearing masks or doing what they should do in terms of social distancing. So I do think among younger people there is a mentality where they don't think they're going to get seriously ill, and they don't think about the potential harm associated with them passing the virus on to somebody else.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure. Um, Guys, there's a lot more to both of these stories. Annie's story of coronavirus cases on the rise among people near UCF, and of course Dana's story about wearing a mask or not to wear a mask in Central Florida. If you guys are interested in learning more about them, they're online at OrlandoSentinel.com right now. Highly encouraged to read. Thank you guys both so much for talking about them. Matt, coming to you for this next story. Some bad news. The closing of the Breakthrough Theater in Winter Park due to coronavirus concerns. What do we know about this closure?
Well, the owner of the theater, Wade Hare, went on Facebook yesterday to give a video message explaining his decision. And what's interesting is, I don't want to say whether it's surprising or not surprising, but what was definitely not surprising were the reasons for the closure, which sort of reflect the values that have made Breakthrough Theater what it is. It's a very community-oriented, family-oriented place. And basically, the two main driving factors to close the physical theater space it hasn't been able to have shows since March, and it's been relying on donations from friends, from supporters, from fans, just to pay the rent, to pay the bills. And Wade Hare, the owner, said, I just can't ask these people for any more money. It's our community. It's not fair to ask them to keep supporting us when we can't provide any live shows. And the second reason was, of course, the coronavirus. Just the idea of trying to reopen that theater was very difficult. It's a very small theater, one of the smallest in Central Florida. It's like seeing a show from your own living room when you're there, which made it very special, but made the idea of social distancing impossible. He says in his message, in order to somehow set up this theater at social distance, we'd only be able to have like 8 or 10 people per show. And there's no economic model that's viable to present shows to 8 people at a time. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So really the decisions were made, with the best reasons to keep the community safe and with the community interest in heart.
That is an incredibly tough decision. That sounds like that they had to make there. I'm wondering, for those who may not be familiar with the theater itself, could you talk just a little bit about Breakthrough and what did it bring to the community?
It was an important theater in our community for many reasons. It was right in the heart of Winter Park, right near Rollins College on Fairbanks. And just as I mentioned, the fact it was so small made it really special. You saw shows there in a way you don't see in big houses and the bigger venues. It was community theater, which means everyone there was a volunteer. So it also added to the sense of, the community coming together to put on a show. I mean, it had this very family-friendly feel. They didn't sell alcohol, but they did sell homemade cookies from Wade's mom in the lobby that were the best cookies in town, I'm just saying. You just felt like you were walking into somebody's home when you saw a show there. And artistically, they did a lot of interesting things. They tried to take some big shows like Jesus Christ Superstar or Aida, I mean, these big cast musicals, and rework them into this little tiny space, which lets you look at some old favorite shows in a new way. They also, because they were small, were able to really pivot their schedule quickly or adapt to changing circumstances. So they would do shows about coping with grief, about school shootings. They could program shows very quickly after news events to sort of give an artistic view or help with the emotional processing of some of the big events that happened in Orlando over the years. And because they were small, they would also take chances on lesser known shows that nobody else did in Orlando. So they had some unique offerings that were appealing that way. And then finally, they were part of the Fringe Festival. The Fringe Festival has some outlying venues, or they call them bring your own venue, where if you don't get into the main campus, you can sign up and do shows in other theaters around town, and they've been a long-time participant in that. So they were a really important aspect of our community.
I have last question for you, Matt. That's kind of a two-parter, really. I'm wondering, even though that Breakthrough is a small theater, I'm wondering, is this a concern that other theaters should be worried about? And as far as Breakthrough goes, I mean, is this truly the last that we're hearing of them?
No, it's definitely not the last we're hearing about them. So I'm answering your second part of your question first. But the first part is yes, other theaters will also have these similar concerns as they work with into reopening. And what you're finding is Breakthrough's way forward is probably going to mirror what a lot of other theaters are grappling with now. Breakthrough said they will change their names. They won't be Breakthrough Theater of Winter Park, since they're not going to have a physical location there, but they'll just be the Breakthrough Theater Company, and they're going to really focus on online initiatives. And doing theater virtually, digitally, online, however you want to call it, is something that all the major theaters in town are looking into and trying to figure out ways that that can be an option going ahead for people who miss theater but aren't comfortable, aren't able to go to an in-person type of gathering. So Wade Hare on his video message gave some insight into the kinds of things that the theater will do online. And I think we have a clip of him talking about that.
Our space at 419 West Fairbanks Avenue may be closing, but a building does not define us. The Breakthrough Theater of Winter Park will now be known as the Breakthrough Theater Company. Theater will not go back to the way it was for a very long time. There is a definite need for virtual theater. We will continue to do what we've been doing since March. We will continue to hold classes and camps. We will continue to produce plays. I will continue my talk show. It is time for us to get creative and think outside the box, which is something the Breakthrough has always had to do, and we've done it with much success. We are incredibly proud of what we have accomplished in the past 11 years, and we are looking forward to what the future may hold. We love our Breakthrough family. You are not getting rid of us just yet. We are just moving forward in a different direction. Your prayers and positive thoughts are greatly appreciated during this emotionally difficult time. We must be out of the theater by June 30th, so we will be reaching out for help. Thank you for everything you have done for us, and hopefully everything you will continue to do.
All right, guys. If you guys are interested in finding out more about Breakthrough Theater, about Wade Hare's message here, Matt is working on the story that should be out later today. As for the other stories that we talked about here on the show, of course, available on OrlandoSentinel.com if you're interested in finding out more. If you're a subscriber, thank you guys so much for continuing to support us. If you're not a subscriber, please consider becoming one, especially if you found the stories here interesting or helpful, or any of the stories that we've been covering, especially around coronavirus in the last couple of months. Please consider promoting our supporting local journalism here in the area. As for OSN, that's our show here for today. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to the reporters for coming in and keeping us filled in. We'll be back again tomorrow at noon. We'll see you then. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on OrlandoSentinel.com.